So if your house floods, you know what I mean? What do you do?
You know, the big things to look for if your house flooded is, did you have flood insurance? You know, hopefully you did. If you had flood insurance, you would then reach out to either the agent, you can reach out directly to FEMA and file a claim with your national flood insurance policy.
Interesting. How long does that take? So your home just flooded. You're not living in it. Like, you're staying in a hotel, you're staying with friends. How long does this whole process take?
It can be, unfortunately, it can be months, especially when it's a wide scale event like what just happened.
Yeah.
And especially the back-to-back. I mean, it was the kind of the double whammy where Helene was just a horrible flooding event for our area. And then Milton.
You call and you're like, hey, my house just flooded. And they're like, we're going to send an adjuster out. Is that like weeks? You're waiting?
The adjuster should make contact within usually 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And what they do is they'll call and schedule time to come by and inspect your house. That usually takes place within a week. And
I heard, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I heard that flood insurance though only covers like up to $250,000.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So there's two different coverages on a flood insurance policy. One is for the building, for the structures. The other is for your contents. You can structure the policy with just building coverage, or you can add contents.
But 250 is max, right? So you're in $1 million house, you only get 250 of coverage. What are you supposed to do?
And that's where like you can get what's called excess flood insurance.
Let's say you don't have that though.
It's a lot of it's then coming out of pocket. You can also.
And what if you can't afford to like fix your own house? You're in this like $1 million house. You only get 250 of coverage. What happens then? It's just you stop making your mortgage payment, or
no, hopefully not. You can. I know FEMA offers individual like disaster relief programs. So FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Act, there's a lot of programs kind of underneath that. I'll say umbrella. One of them is the National Flood Insurance Program, and that's where like you can get an NFIP policy. And that covers the flood insurance. 250 is the max. If you've exhausted that and you need to get additional help, that's where you can actually reach out to FEMA directly and file paperwork, and you can get aid money directly from FEMA. And that's what a lot of people are doing, because FEMA policies, although they provide coverage, they're not a one-size-fits-all, I'll say, policy. For instance, like mold isn't covered on a FEMA policy, which is crazy.
I saw that on social media. Everyone was like, you got to like take out the drywall and take out everything because that's your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stop the mold.
Yep.
I don't know. I feel like when something happens, you don't want to touch anything, but it's like, so you start ripping your house apart. Is that going to mess up the adjusters?
No, so you're able and encouraged to do certain things to prevent like mold and prevent further damage. So you can start ripping out drywall. You can start making repairs. You can start getting the wet, soggy furniture out of the house. You just have to document pictures, save as much as you can so the adjuster can see that. You know, maybe not save the entire sheet of drywall, but a portion of it. Take pictures of the water line. A lot of times you'll get either a tape measure and you want to see how high it went. Take a picture of that before you start cutting out the drywall. You'll actually see a water line on the drywall that the flood waters caused, and you want to take a picture of that so the adjuster can see how high it actually went up. As much as you can document with photos and videos before you start doing that demolition, the better off you'll be, because the adjuster can see kind of the full scope of what happened.
So the adjuster comes out, it's $250,000 max. You might have more damage than that. Will your homeowners insurance policy like cover the rest?
No, so that's the tricky thing, where if anything that happened as a result of rising water, so water that started outside, rose up, came into the house, that's not covered under standard home insurance policy. The tricky thing is, let's say you had rising water and then also your roof blew off and or a tree fell down and water came in your house that way. That gets a little tricky because you had water damage from rising water, but you also had water damage from I'll say from the top down. And that's where you could file a home insurance claim and get coverage for the damage that was caused from the rain down.
So someone on social media, they said, when you call your insurance company, don't use the word flood. Use the word water intrusion.
And that's, at the end of the day, that the adjuster will be able to determine if it came up or not. The big thing is an opening, where if an opening was caused in your house that allowed that water to come in. So openings aren't supposed to exist, right? In your house. So tree fell on the roof. What caused that? Hurricane. Well, you have hurricane coverage. So the ensuing damage after that is covered because of that.
How do flood zones affect the flood insurance?
Yeah, so there's technically, I'll say, 3 standard flood zones. There's VE, which is you're right on the water. You're right on the clear water.
I've never heard of that before. VE.
So VE means like there's wave action. So your house is literally like you walk out your front door there's sand and there's the water. The next one is AE. That's the most common.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Or an AE flood zone. That's where, the mortgage is going to require the flood insurance. And the next zone is an X zone. So with an X zone, it means that it's not impossible for your house to flood. It's just very improbable. So FEMA defines it as a 0.0, I believe it is, a 0.01% chance of flooding each year. So it's a very low probability.
And the flooding that we're seeing right now, like everywhere, these are in flood zone X's in some instances.
A lot of that, and that's what's crazy because the odds of that happening.
And if you're in flood zone X, as we just talked about, and your home floods, and you don't have flood insurance because you don't have to carry flood insurance, you're just SOL.
Yeah, there's no coverage for it. The good news though is that if you're in an X flood zone, it's pretty inexpensive to get flood insurance. You're looking at $500 a year, maybe $600 a year.
Yeah, but just so many people don't carry flood insurance. It's wild.
And that's where I always kind of let people know they're buying a house, right? And they have so much going on. There's so many expenses coming in and out. The nice thing is you don't have to purchase it the day of closing. You can add flood insurance later. There's a waiting period. It's usually 30 days. Some privately held companies, like you have FEMA, which is the federal, they have a 30-day wait. A lot of privately held companies have maybe a 10 to 15-day wait. So it's not good to wait until there's a hurricane coming because you won't be able to get it in time. But I always tell people to look out for drainage. That I think is one of the biggest issues that's happened in areas that can't flood because they're not near the coast or near a body of water, is drainage. So I know I lived in Seminole Heights. The infrastructure was 100 plus years old. So we'd have a normal storm and water would come up over the side.
Right.
So I carried flood insurance. So I bought the house, I noticed that, and I got flood insurance because all it takes is a couple back-to-back storms. That water has to go somewhere. And when the ground is so saturated, it's just going to come up.
That's what you're seeing everywhere, I think.
And that's what we're seeing. Especially, Wesley Chapel, we have flooding going on right now in Wesley Chapel. There's was it Cypress Creek? That little creek is overflowing. I think it's up 7 feet.
We're off the Withlacoochee up in Sumter County. And I took a photo of by the river a couple days before the storm hit. And then we just drove by yesterday to see it. And where I had parked my truck, which was 100 yards from the river, the water was all the way over. It was crazy. Even on my property, my neighbor's property, it looks like a lake over there. But my property, you said look for drainage. I don't even know how you would look for that. Because looking at the properties, it's you know what I mean?
Grass.
Yeah, it's just grass. Who would have known? Most people aren't carrying massive amounts of reserves, and they kind of have their budget worked out to where all their bills are covered type of thing. And something like this happens. That kind of goes back to my question on, are they just going to foreclose on the house, or what do you do?
And that's where FEMA does do a good job of
So FEMA will even step in if they don't have a flood policy. Oh, interesting.
So FEMA, they'll, unfortunately, there's a couple people that either canceled their flood insurance, decided not to get it because they didn't have, they paid off their house. And there's been a couple people that have flooded and they've been able to reach out to FEMA directly. There's an application to fill out. And one of the criteria, though, is you need to get flood insurance.
Moving forward.
We all fall into this. It's almost like roulette where you spin the wheel and it lands on something. You're like, it'll never happen again. Well, each year, the probability, it can happen again. So people look back, it hasn't flooded here in 30 years. And so the odds are it's not going to flood. Well, this is a perfect example where you do have these two massive storms that go back to back. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that weren't prepared for it with insurance. And so that's why I think it's really important to have those coverages in place and just and try to think for the future. If something worse, the worst case scenario happened, are you covered for it?
All right. So if floods, you call your insurance, you're staying somewhere else. It takes how long so they just write you a check?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, once they determine what the cost to repair is going to be, let's say you had a $2,000 deductible and it was a $22,000 claim. They'll write you a check for $20,000, and that'll go towards the.
Bro, who's this $20,000 after all?
Math, simple math.
Yeah, okay, I got you. But you could just get that check for $200,000, say peace out to that house, and then just go to Cancun.
So technically, yeah. There's sometimes.
I'm not saying you should do that.
You shouldn't do that. Yeah, you should fix it. Insurance companies can put what's called recoverable depreciation. So let's say the total cost was $200,000. They may not give you that full check for $200,000. They might give you a check for $50,000, and as you show that you've made repairs, they'll give you more money.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
So it's called recoverable because you can recover it. Depreciation. So they depreciate the total payout of the claim. But once you start to show proof of repair, you'll come.
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen with insurance now? Is it going to go through the roof? Is it going to be unaffordable?
I don't think so. So the good news, flood insurance, most of it's all falling under.
I'm just talking about all insurance. Flood, home, is it all going to go up in Florida now?
I don't think so. And the reason being is, for flood insurance, most of it's federally governed. And there's rate caps put in on those policies. So they can increase rates by more than, I think it's 15%.
Do you think insurance companies will go belly up from this?
No. And the reason for that is so you have the flood insurance side. On the home insurance side, every home insurance company has what's called reinsurance, which is an insurance policy over their book of business. And so when a catastrophic event like this
layers
happens,
and layers of insurance.
It's crazy. And they actually call it the reinsurance tower. And if you look at it, you can see the different layers.
I learned about this actually when I was younger. It's called a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, exactly. It starts at the top and it trickles down. It's a great investment strategy. But most of these hurricane claims that are falling under the home insurance side is hitting reinsurance. Now, if reinsurance rates go up, of course, our home insurance rates will go up. But there's been a lot of new legislation passed to prevent a lot of roofing fraud, and that's kind of what's plagued our industry for the last couple of years. So hopefully that legislation helps, and it won't cause another 50% increase next year.
Because the one thing I've heard, everyone's like, oh my gosh, insurance is going to be too expensive where you can't afford to live in Florida. It's almost like the NAR settlement statement, the real estate agents are going to go away. It's like, that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's like, it probably won't go that far. We might see 20% increases next year.
Yeah.
I think that wouldn't be,
I'm surprised they don't make them like, if the home has that much damage, it's like, all right, look, we're going to take it as a loss and we're going to build it up. This home now has to be out stilts.
And so there's a rule, and it's all governed by the county. It's like a 50% rule. So if the cost of repair is more than 50% of the assessed value on the property's website, the county will say you need to build your home up. They'll make you put it on
FEMA will give you money for that?
They won't. So that's where they'll pay you out. So let's say it was a total loss of $200,000. They're going to give you a $250,000 check. Okay. You can use that towards elevating it, but they don't pay for cost of compliance, they call it.
Wow.
So yeah, that opens a whole nother can of worms.